views, opinions, and content of this show are those of the host, guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect those of Local Matters Broadcasting, LLC, its owners, partners, affiliates, assigns, or heirs. Having said that, it's now time to say good morning, St. Johns County. Welcome to the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging, better known in our community as the COA. We are your local nonprofit agency who for the past 50 years has been leading and advocating for the dignity, independence, health, and community involvement of older St. Johns County residents. I'm Brian Robinson, Program Director for COA, broadcasting to you live from the studio of WFOY, 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. And before we get into our show, let me remind everyone that if you have a question, a comment, or a suggestion for a radio show topic, please send your email to radio@coasjc.org. You can even do that while we're live on the air this morning if you have a question during the show. I have my email up, so feel free to shoot me a question, radio@coasjc.org. This morning I am joined by St. Johns County Supervisor of Elections, Vicky Oakes. Vicky is an elections professional with more than 35 years of experience conducting elections in St. Johns County. Vicky has served as the Supervisor of Elections in St. Johns County for the past 12 years and previously served as the Assistant Supervisor of Election for 23 years. Vicky, welcome to the COA Weekly Radio Show.
Good morning, Brian. Welcome, and thank you so much for having me today.
It is great to have you. And before we get started with our show, I've been asked to make sure that our listeners are aware that you did file for re-election, but because nobody filed to run against you by the June 14th deadline, Florida statute states you are no longer considered a candidate and are declared automatically elected. Now, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. And I'm also currently the Supervisor of Elections, so I will begin my new term in January of 25.
Well, very exciting, and I just want to commend you and applaud you, your staff, on the amazing job that you do to ensure that St. Johns County residents are educated about voting and are provided with ample opportunities to cast their vote during an election. Your website is amazing. I've been there, and all the questions that I have, I can find the answers on there very easily, so great website that you've put together. And before we came on the show, I told you, all the questions I'm going to ask you this morning, I already know the answers to, but there are some folks that are out there listening this morning, and we have a lot of seniors who tune in, and a lot of them, they don't like the internet, so they're not going to get on your website and search around to find the answers. So that's who I'm gearing these questions to this morning as we're talking about the upcoming elections. Now, I just want to say, voting is an honor and a privilege that we were given citizens of the United States. Back in 2000, I was still living in West Virginia at the time, and I was working for Magistrate Mike Powell, which was an elected position, and he won that election by 3 votes. 3 votes. Now, the funny thing about it, Vicky, was there was all kinds of people that would come up to him afterwards and say, "Yep, it was my vote that won." Help you win. So, but every vote matters. Every vote matters. So, in this very first segment, if you would, tell our listeners if there's any changes that they need to know about the upcoming elections.
Yes. So, our legislature changes laws all of the time. So, most recently, since the 2022 election, we've had a number of changes with the vote-by-mail laws. So do you by any chance vote by mail, Brian?
I do vote by mail, yes. I find it more convenient for myself because sometimes, I don't know what my work schedule is going to be. And, sometimes I have to work over, so I might not make it to the poll. Right now, I do know that we have early voting. That's always an option as well. But I have found for myself that it's very convenient for me to be able to vote by mail.
Okay. So all of the vote-by-mail requests expired following the 2022 election, and voters now have to request their ballot every election cycle. So I was going to ask you if you already did make your request.
Yes.
Okay,
great. Yes, I happened to run across a news article that stated that, and I was like, okay, I better get signed up.
Right, better get signed up. So if you have not requested your ballot for this year, now's a perfect time. So there's a couple of ways. The old-fashioned way, pick up the phone and call our office at 823-2238, and my staff will be happy to assist you if you'd like to request a vote-by-mail ballot or you need assistance.
And I have called your office on a couple occasions, and I would like to commend you that it's great that a live person picks up the phone. It's not a recording where I have to press 5 and then press 2 and then press 1 before I get to somebody. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. And then additionally, besides some changes in the vote by mail law, we have made some precinct changes since the last election as well. So for voters that are traditionalist and choose to vote at their precinct on election day, just remind them to check their polling place before they head out to the precinct to vote if it's election day. You have several ways to find out what your location is. Our website is a great resource, votesjc.gov. But we send you a sample ballot. All voters receive a sample ballot prior to each election, and your election day polling place is actually printed right on your sample ballot. And then it's also on your voter information card. And there again, if you don't know, you can always pick up the phone and call the office, and we'll be happy to direct you to the correct polling place the first time.
And I do appreciate that, because I know we moved here, my family and I moved here in 2018. And, we don't know a lot of people. We don't know who the people are that are running. So I appreciate the sample ballot coming in advance, because then we took the time, my wife and I took the time to research the candidates, to see who are, what they stand for, what their policies are, and so forth, to help us prepare when it's time to vote, to vote for the person that we feel would best represent us. So we appreciate that.
Right. And that's some of the best money I spend, Brian, on sample ballots, because you're not the only one. We hear that everywhere. Voters love their voter-specific sample ballots received from my office. We mail them about 3 weeks in advance. For the election coming up, they're going in the mail on July 26. So voters will receive it as their specific party and has all the candidates listed on them, plus information about voting by mail, early voting dates, times, and locations, and also a reminder about their election day polling place.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're going to do this. We're going to go ahead and take our first break. I got lots of questions to ask you during our time together, but let me go ahead and take our first break. You are listening to the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging. Our guest is Vicky Oakes. We'll be right back after these commercial messages. And welcome back to the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging here on WFOY 102.1 FM. Your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. And I'm joined this morning by St. Johns County Supervisor of Elections, Vicky Oakes. And prior to the commercial break, we were talking about some new things. And so we have other new things that you wanted to tell our listeners about.
We do. So part of my job is voter education, and I take that very seriously. We have a publication that we started doing back in 2012, Brian. So we've been doing it for several years now. And it's called the St. Johns County Citizens Guide to Registering and Voting. It's a little newspaper that comes to your mailbox, and we have prepared and are getting ready to send on Friday 137,000 of our Citizens Guides out to all residential mailboxes in St. Johns County. So starting on Saturday and all next week, look for your Citizens Guides in the mail. You'll recognize it has a nice flag. It's very patriotic and is a good informational piece for everyone to get ready for the upcoming elections, both our August 20th primary and the November 5th general election.
And I hope that you're not hand stamping those. That's a lot.
No, I know. No, we have a company that prints and mails them. We use a mail house for that.
That's good, because that's a lot.
Yeah. So, Brian, I do know that some of your seniors are quite tech savvy.
There are, yes. So we have a variety, right? So we have some seniors who are like, I want nothing to do with internet. I don't want email. No. And then you have others who are very tech savvy. They have their cell phone. They're working it better than I can sometimes. So, yes, we do have some tech savvy seniors.
Okay. So for your tech savvy seniors, we have something new. It's called Text My Gov Elections, and you can go to our website at votesjc.gov. You'll see a little pop-up in the lower right-hand corner, and you can sign up for text alerts from us for important messages coming from my office, and then additionally, you can sign up if you have questions. You can text us. So, It's a little difficult these days, more so than it used to be, to get the word out to people because you and I remember the days when the newspaper used to come to the mailbox and we'd have our morning coffee and read our morning newspaper.
Absolutely.
Well, local newspapers have gone away, and for the longest time, that was a major form of communication from our office to our voters. But now newspapers have gone away. Like you said, not everybody does the internet. So for us, direct mail has become one of the most important. We also use our website for educational information. And then, like you said, not everybody does the internet. Not everyone, we have quite a social media platform, and not everyone does that. So, picking up the phone and services we can provide 24/7 on our website. We have lots of ways now, and this is just a new way to try to communicate because everybody has a cell phone.
Yes, exactly. And I love the fact that you're taking different approaches to make sure that you're reaching as many people as possible.
Right.
I love that.
And that's what it's about, because I want our voters and citizens informed. I want them educated, and I want them to participate in our elections because, like you said earlier, Brian, our right to vote, it is one of the most cherished rights that we have as American citizens.
It really is. And I've been voting since I was eligible to vote. Now 51 years old, so I have voted in a lot of different elections over the years. And a lot of people think, oh, well, my vote doesn't matter. Yes, it does. One vote can make a difference.
It absolutely can. And you mentioned in your first segment about
3 votes.
3 votes.
3 votes.
Right here in St. Johns County, St. Augustine Beach, in 2010, the Beach City Commission had a commissioner elected by 1 vote. And then a lot of residents have lived here for a long time. Some of our residents and voters remember the 2016 primary election where Commissioner Paul Waldron was elected by 7 votes.
Wow. Yes, so every vote does matter. All right, so I want to get into some of these other questions that I have listed here. When is the last date to register to vote, and what are the dates, if you would mention again, for the upcoming elections?
Okay, so first up, last day to register to vote or change your party affiliation for the primary election is July 22nd. So that's coming.
That's coming up.
That's coming up
just
pretty
a couple
quick.
Weeks away.
Yes, just a couple of weeks away. I want to mention also about Florida's closed primary, Brian, because you know, since you've already voted, moving from another state, Florida's laws are very different.
They are, yes.
So for your new listeners and people that have moved here recently, may not be aware that Florida is a closed primary. Your political party dictates the ballot that you will receive in a primary election, period. So St. Johns County, we are about 54% registered Republicans. If you've looked at our candidate list, you'll see there's lots of Republicans on it. So Republicans are going to have a lot on their ballot. Democrats, registered Democrats have 1 race on their ballot, a U.S. Senate race. There are 4 candidates on the ballot. And in this election, we have a particular circumstance. It's called a universal primary contest. And what that means is it's actually a Republican race. And so we have 2 candidates that filed to run for clerk of the circuit court. There are only 2 candidates. They are both Republican, and that race will not move ahead to the general election ballot. It will be settled in the primary. Therefore, that makes it a universal primary contest open to all voters in the primary. So, Brian, let's just say you are a registered Democrat. I don't know your party, but let's just say you are. You're going to have the U.S. Senate race on your ballot, and then you're going to actually have that Republican race. Don't think I've lost my mind. You're going to have that Republican race on your ballot, and you're going to be able to vote on that. as is a voter who is no party affiliation, because of Florida's closed primary laws, they can't vote on the party races, but this is the one exception.
Okay.
So voters with no party affiliation, the only race that's going to be on their ballot is the clerk of the circuit court. So your party does matter. Our sample ballots for the election are already available on our website for voters who want to go look them up. And they do have time in advance to look and see what's on their ballot. For those of your listeners that are tech savvy, that want to look and see and say, maybe there's other races that I want to be involved in. The fact of the matter is people change their parties all the time. So the deadline is July 22nd, last day to register to vote or change your party, important upcoming date.
Very good. So this next question came to mind as I thought about myself. Like I recently moved from one place that I lived in St. Augustine, not too far down the road, but it did put me into another precinct, a different voting precinct. So my question is, if a current St. Johns County resident moves to another location within St. Johns County, does the person have to notify you?
Yes, they do. So that's the thing I love about early voting, because, there's no wrong place to go.
Okay.
But if you vote at your precinct on election day, you are required to vote in the precinct where you reside. Another tool that we have on our website is My Voter Status. It's a quick link right on our front page. You can click on it. You can type in your information and pull up your voter record. And you can see your address. You can make your address change right from there. And did you know, Brian, that from there, your vote by mail ballot, you can track it?
Yes. I did that in the past. Yes.
You can see when we mail it to you, when you vote it and return it to us, you can go back and see the day we received it, and you can actually verify right online that your vote by mail ballot has been counted.
Yes, I love that feature.
Yes, so keeping your address up to date is very, very important. And it's as simple as picking up the phone and calling the office. We can take your address change over the phone and then mail you out a new voter information card, which will tell you your precinct and your districts, your congressional, your Florida Senate, Florida House, County Commission, and School Board, because those are the races that are going to be on your ballot. So it is very important that you keep your address up to date. You can not only call and update your address, you can do it right online. Make your address change right online.
When we moved.
And for those that are tech savvy, you can also register to vote online. Florida does have voter registration online. You're required to have a Florida driver's license to utilize our online registration system.
So let's just say somebody goes to the wrong precinct. They've waited in line. They finally get up to vote. What happens?
Okay, so the poll worker is going to pull their information up. They're going to ask them, do you have any changes to make today? And Brian, you just say, oh, yes, I moved around I moved. So we're going to give you a voter registration application. We're going to ask you to fill it out. We're going to make your address change. And let's just say you just moved across the street. Well, it's not going to affect your precinct. So then we're going to process you, update your address. And then the worker actually doesn't know until they've completed your address change process in our system whether or not we say, okay, here you are, then take your voting pass, step down, you get to vote because it didn't change your precinct, or, oh, you've moved across town, here's it's called an action ticket, I'm going to hand it to you. This will give you information and direct you to your polling place, including providing directions.
All right. Well, that music means we got to go to our next break, so we will pick up our conversation right after these commercial messages. And welcome back to the weekly radio show of the St. Johns County Council on Aging here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. I'm joined this morning by St. Johns County Supervisor of Elections, Vicky Oakes, and we've just been going through some different questions that I've put together. And we were talking about if somebody moves to a different precinct and, what happens if they go to the wrong polling place. And so another question, ID, is that required to cast a ballot?
Yes, Florida law does require a voter to have photo and signature identification when they vote in person. So your driver's license is the perfect example, and I've worked in many polling places and early voting sites, because if I go out and visit and they're busy, I pitch in and help too. But voters have two things. Our voters are very prepared. The two things in their hands that they come in with are their sample ballot and their driver's license. The driver's license is not the only form of photo ID. We have a list of about 12 different forms of acceptable identification in Florida. That's why Florida, it works so well. And we also have a provisional ballot law that says if you do not have photo ID, you're not turned away, that you may still vote a provisional ballot.
Okay, I remember I did vote in person one year after we first moved here, and I typically when I sign, like if it's a credit card or whatever, I just right, and it looks like a doctor's signature, and the poll worker looked at me and he said, I need you to sign it so it looks like your ID. Because on my ID, I take my time and I write Brian C. Robinson. He's like, I need your signature to look like that. So, so I had to do it again before he would let me vote. So that's great. Another thing I wanted to talk about this morning is mail-in voting. As I've stated, that's something that I find convenient for myself to do. I wanted to provide you with a couple of some of the arguments made by those who oppose mail-in voting, and just ask you to respond to it.
Okay.
So one of the things that I read is those who oppose mail-in voting say mail-in voting increases the risk of fraud because no form of ID is required as it is when you vote in person.
Okay, so at 21, 22, and 23, our state legislature 3 years in a row changed Florida law. We had 100-page election bills with each year, and they have put some serious guardrails now around vote by mail. When you call and request your vote by mail, Brian, you are not only going to have to now provide for us your name, your address, your birth date, and the ballot mailing address, you are also going to have to provide for us your Florida driver's license or ID number, or the last four digits of your Social Security number, so that we can indeed verify that it is you requesting your ballot, number one. Number two, the change in the law about annual requests now for vote-by-mail ballots. You have to request them every election cycle. So it's on you, the voter. If you choose to vote by mail, you have to request it. Of course, we've talked about it. You can call or use our online resources or fill out a form and send it in. Number three, we have signature verification on each and every vote by mail ballot. And what the law requires, and I have a staff of 4 people that at election time they come in and all they do is one by one verify. When you send in your vote by mail ballot, one of my workers is going to process your ballot. It's going to pull your vote by mail request up. They're going to look at the signature that's on your envelope, and they're going to match it with the signature that is on your voter file. And what the law says is those have to match in order for your ballot to count. Because if you think about it, when you vote in person, you provide ID. When you vote by mail, your signature is your identification. So let's say you forgot to sign your envelope. Oh dear, you might be surprised how many people just don't sign them. Or let's just say your signature doesn't match. We're going to reach out to you. The law requires it. We are going to, if we have a phone number for you, we're going to call you. We have an email, we're going to email you. And then we're going to drop a letter in the mail to your ballot mailing address that says, hey, there's a problem with your vote by mail ballot. Here's what you need to do to cure your ballot and still have it count. You have to fill this affidavit out, return it to us along with copies of your photo identification no later than 5 p.m. following the second day following the election, and your ballots can still count. So we have a number of guardrails around vote-by-mail ballots now because of the action our state legislature has taken. Additionally, there was some law changes with our formerly known as drop boxes,
I remember
vote-by-mail
those.
drop boxes. They are now called secure ballot intake stations. So law changes restricted them to being only available at the Supervisor of Elections office and at early voting sites available to voters during the hours of early voting. They are monitored by an employee of my office at all times.
Okay.
So those are some of the restrictions now. And it's worked very well. We haven't had any problems. People just really need to remember that if they're going to vote by mail, they have to request their ballot in time to be mailed to them. By the way, Brian, your vote by mail ballot will go in the mail on July 16th. So start looking for it next week.
Great. And so in that instance, like you said, if the signature doesn't match up with what you have on file and the person has until 5 p.m. 2 days following the election.
Correct.
Right? So probably they're going to need to bring it to you, right? Because there's no way it's going to get to you in the mail in time.
Well, with the notices, we provide a postage paid return envelope. We encourage people, if they're local, yes, bring them to us. We have people that scan them and email them to us. They can do that. They can. So it's up to them. We just have a deadline that they have to reach our office. And you'd be surprised. We'll call people and say, hey, and they'll say, I'll be right there. I'm coming. Don't need to mail me anything. Or we will email them and hadn't been out in the email of 5 minutes and they're calling us. What do I need to do? Can I just tell me? And that communication with our voters is very important.
And so I think it's important for someone who's voting by mail to know what signature that you have on file, like what it looks like, right? Because so mine is what's on my driver's license. So when I'm signing my ballot, I look at my signature on there to make sure that I don't do my typical squiggly, right?
Right.
All right. Well, that music means we got another break, so we're going to have to do that. We'll continue our conversation right after these messages. And welcome back to the final segment of the weekly radio show, the St. Johns County Council on Aging, here on WFOY 102.1 FM, your local radio station for news, sports, and talk. I'm joined this morning by St. Johns County Supervisor of Elections, Vicky Oakes, and we've been talking a lot about elections, and I feel like our time together is really not long enough because there's a whole lot more that we could talk about. Before we jump back in, let me just remind our listeners that next week, same place, same time, right here on WFOY 102.1 FM, we'll have Megan Wall with Legal Aid as our guest. So tune in next week, same time, same place. So for our last segment, what I wanted to talk about is the integrity of voting equipment. So conspiracy theorists, they love to target the integrity of voting equipment. What do you say to ease the mind of somebody out there listening this morning who is sincerely concerned and worries that his or her vote will not be tabulated correctly, or that some election network system, the election network system will be hacked by some operative in a foreign country, and their vote will be changed to the other person? What do you say to that person who really genuinely is sincerely concerned because they've read a news article or they've watched something on the news about this?
That's a great question, Brian, and I really appreciate the opportunity to address that. Let me say, I have 100% confidence in our voting system and our processes. You can too, and here's why. Do you know Florida's on a paper ballot? Floridians have been voting on paper ballots since 2008, and all of St. Johns County, we went to paper ballots, Brian, in 1994. So we have been on a paper-based ballot voting system for years. And I don't care what anybody says, you can't hack a paper ballot. It's an actual physical record of how someone votes that comes in kind of handy sometimes if you have a close race and you have to have a recount. That's exactly what they're for. I'm 100% advocate in paper ballots. Another thing is our voting system is not open to the internet. It is a single server in my office that programs and tabulates the election results. We've been offering tours of our office since 2021. We have had hundreds of people come to our office and learn the facts about how elections are conducted, not just in St. Johns County, but in Florida. So we have numerous auditing processes from our poll workers that check you in every day of early voting and at your precinct, every ballot that's issued, every ballot that's tabulated, and every voter that is checked in. There is a 3-way check every day that have to be accounted for: early voting and our precinct selection day. And at the end of the night, when election night, when workers come back, we have to check all the paperwork to make sure that all the votes are in, everything is counted before we go home election night.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that Florida has been auditing our elections since 2007?
I did not know that.
Yes. So there's 2 ways to do an audit. And prior to this year, St. Johns County did what's called a public manual audit, where we draw at random a race that's on the ballot, precincts, and we retrieve the vote by mail, the early voting, and the precinct ballots, hand count them, and compare the hand counted totals against the tabulated totals.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing this in every election that has not had a recount since 2007. Year after year, election after election, our manual audits have confirmed the accuracy of our machines.
Mm-hmm.
You see, our machines have to go through rigorous testing. Right now, my staff is running hundreds and thousands of ballots through the tabulators. And then we have what's called a public logic and accuracy test that anybody could come to. I'd like to invite you, Brian, if you'd like to come watch and see our election simulation. This happens to every county in Florida. We have our public logic and accuracy test, and our equipment has to be certified that it is counting accurately before it can be used in an election. Happens with every election.
So very proactive, a lot of proactive steps in place to make sure that when election day comes, everything's going to be tabulated correctly.
Yes. And I want to tell you about our new audit system that I bought last year in 2023. The second way, besides a manual audit, is to do what's called a 100% audit. I had to buy a system. It was called Clear Ballot Audit System. The state was kind enough to give us some grant money. About 72% was paid by the state with security grant funds. Beginning in January with the March election, we began, along with 23 other counties in Florida, conducting 100% audits on our election. And we will be doing that moving forward. In the March election, our accuracy was 99.996%.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we literally, the ballots run through the tabulators, and then they're run separately through the Clear Audit System. And after the election is certified, we compare the results against each other. The reason that we were 99.996% accurate was we were one ballot off. It was an election day ballot. Our clerk made excellent notes because the clerk also realized with their accounting that they were one ballot off. And our clerks make great documentation for everything that happens at the polling place. So we could tell by the documents there was a ballot jam. It was not handled properly. And so we knew election night by the documentation that this particular precinct had one more ballot in the count than it should have. So it was revealed in the audit. So we had to declare that because the election was already certified. There wasn't anything we could do except to declare it. Okay, we were one ballot off. The poll worker made an error. He didn't realize with the ballot jam that the machine had counted the ballot. So instead of putting it in the box as a counted ballot, he ran it through a second time. But if it had been a machine recount in a close race, that would have been resolved. So we're auditing now 100% all the ballots in our election moving ahead, and I'm excited about this new technology that we've rolled out this year.
Yeah, so somebody out there listening that might be a little bit worried, they can rest assured that their vote will be tabulated correctly when they go to vote. And a question that was coming to my mind as you were talking, so like mail-in voting, early voting, is that tabulated beforehand, or do you wait till actual election day to lump it in with all the others that vote on election day?
Okay, so early voting, think about it this way. It's exactly the same as election day, that you mark your ballot, you put in the tabulator, it's counted right then. Mm-hmm. So early voting is uploaded election day and is available for release shortly after 7 p.m. because, everybody wants election results at 7:01.
Sure. Yeah.
Great question on the vote by mail. A lot of our procedures, Brian, people do not know it, but they are open to the public. For example, Florida has now become the gold standard in conducting elections in our nation. Mm-hmm. Because of our laws, because our laws do allow us to open and count our vote by mail ballots in advance of election day. The dates and times that we do that, those meetings are open to the public. Brian, if you want to come sometime and watch our process for opening and counting those vote by mail ballots, you are more than welcome, and I invite you to do so. It's quite a learning experience.
Well, that music there means it's time for our show to be over. Well, like I said, there'll be a lot more that I would love to talk with you about, so we'll have to have you come on again another time, maybe right before the general election. We can work something out to have you come on. So thank you so much for being our guest this morning.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.